Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about doing bezels with open backs, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it, and also there's a couple of reasons you might want to do it, probably three. One is oftentimes you have a stone that has a pretty back that you want the pattern on it to be able to be seen as well. Another would be if you have a stone that has a lot of translucency and it looks better when you get light from both sides of it. That's another situation. And the final situation I think I would do an open back is when you're doing a really big stone and you're trying to save some weight, especially if it's a pendant. Sometimes they can get pretty heavy and uncomfortable to wear, so you can reduce the weight by getting rid of the back of the bezel. So those are three different things that I'm going to cover, and how to do a small one and a big one. So stay tuned. Alright, let's get started. I'm going to show you how to make two different kinds. For smaller stones, oftentimes I'll create a lip on the inside of a bezel for the stone to have a little platform to sit on, and typically I'll use 18 gauge round wire along with just some standard, I use 3/16 inch bezel, but whatever depth the bezel you use is fine as long as it's tall enough for the stone to be able to sit on top of the platform I'm creating, as well as have enough bezel to grab onto the stone later. But first off, we're just going to do what we normally do and make a bezel, minus the bottom. As I said, this particular one is a little piece of nephrite jade, and I think jade looks better when it gets a little light from both sides, so that's one of the reasons I would do it with this one maybe. So, okay. For the inside lip, like I said, I'm going to use a little piece of 18 gauge wire. The end flap first. You can wrap this around something round, or use a round nose pliers, or any kind of cylindrical object if you want. I just have been doing this like this for so long that I usually just kind of spin it into a circle by hand here with the pliers. If I cross it over like this, it allows me to hold it above the bezel and see whether I need to go up or down size-wise. And just adjust accordingly so it's a little closer. So generally I'll cut it slightly longer than it needs to be and then snip little pieces out of the wire until it fits tightly in the bottom of the bezel. So there's a little bit of trial and error here. Just put it on top of there, and I can see that it's still just a little too big, so I'm just going to snip a little bit out of there. If it's too tight, it'll try to sit in there a little bit crooked when you force it in there, and that creates a not flat platform for your stone to sit on, which is not ideal. Okay, that's pretty good. So now the easiest way to solder that in is just make sure first that it's sitting at the bottom of the bezel there, because you don't want it doing a wavy thing or anything. I'm gonna use a lot of solder here, and I'm gonna put it in kind of a little configuration like that. And what I'll do is I'll flux it, this here, and then I'll set that on top of that, and then just we'll solder it in. Okay, you just want to make sure it's touching the bezel and the little wire that's on the inside, and then you heat it kind of from the outside like you normally would a bezel to get the bottom to attach, at least the way I do it. Once it gets hot enough, there's a flow and it'll just suck right up in there. Okay, then I generally just take the bastard file if you need to, you can use the jeweler's file to clean the edge up a little. One thing I've noticed over the years when I look at a lot of jewelry that's imported from overseas is they'll solder a bottom onto a bezel, and then they'll use a jeweler's saw to cut out a hole if they want an open back on the bezel. And generally found that that looks sort of amateurish in my opinion, and so with this you get a relatively neat, clean line like that, and so when you can see it from the back it looks better, I think. So, alright, so that'll be for a small one. This one is just got a pretty sardonyx here, or red onyx, whichever you prefer, and it allows some light to go through it, and I got a couple of examples. This was for a small one, so I used a little piece of 18 gauge wire. I'm doing a bigger one. A lot of times, I don't know if you can see this one, this is a little bit of moss agate, and it has such a pretty pattern in it, it's hard to see unless you got pretty good light, but I did it open backed so that you'd be able to see the pattern, and I think that turned out kind of pretty. So, but you'll notice on this one I used 14 gauge square wire, which is a little bit wider and thicker and gives a nice clean look, I think. So we'll do a bezel for this here, and I'll use 14 gauge square wire and do exactly the same thing that I just did with this, just with thicker wire. So when you're using square wire, it has a tendency to, when you're trying to get it to curve, it has a tendency to twist, and then you end up with the side tilted that you don't want to have tilted, you want it to be flat. And so you have to sometimes spend a little time getting it straight first and controlling that twist when you go to round it out. So I'm going to first of all straighten this out a little bit off and then file it flat. To prevent that from doing that twist thing, if I use these wide nose pliers, it controls that a little bit better. Just like before, I'm going to overlap them like this so I can kind of squish it down or stretch it out in order to figure out how big of a piece I need in there. So, just go to the side for now. I'm going to sit that over that, and I can see I'm still a little big there. We're getting pretty close, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. Get it shaped a little bit better, and then we can gradually snip little pieces out until we get it just right. We're starting to get pretty close. I always file this till it's flush all the way around. So it's still got a little of that sloppiness left from where I had that partial solder melt, so I'm just going to file that smoother. It allows for a nice clean look. It's not uneven generally. From the back it's going to look like that, so I think it ends up looking pretty nice, I think, and allows, you know, some light to go through. So and that's how you do it. Again, like I said, I think it's a little bit nicer looking than putting a bottom on there and then sawing out a hole. I also think it reduces the amount of weight in the piece you're doing, and sometimes you just want to have a lot more light coming through the stone. So there you go. One other thing I meant to mention is sometimes instead of just having a plain open back like that, I like to sort of mirror the design of the stone. Like sometimes stones have some intricate patterns to them and stuff like that, and I'll add some extra decoration on the back just kind of as a bonus. So here's another example where I did some Larimar that had some kind of wavy patterns to it that I followed. So I just thought it was kind of a fun variation that you can do. So. Okay, that's how you do an open back bezel. At least that's the way that I do it. Hopefully you found it useful, and if you did, would you please subscribe to my channel and share it with others who might also find it useful, and like the video. And please come back for more such useful tips like this. And thanks again. Happy silversmithing.